In this episode, which is a two-part episode, I review Network from 1976. Network was directed by SIDNEY Lumet. It was written by Paddy Chayefsky, and it starred Faye Dunaway, William Holden, Robert Duvall, and Peter Finch. I also recently interviewed the editor of this film, Academy Award-winning editor Alan Heim. Here's what he has to say about working on Network. And I just wanted to get into your relationship with Lumet, because the first film you
Yes.
edited was The Seagull, and then the last of the Mobile Hotshots. And then you worked on the sound department for the Palm Broker, the group, and Bye Bye Braver Man. You mentioned he didn't work well with editors. Why was that?
Sydney came out of live television, so the editing was basically done with finger snaps.
Right.
And in fact, when we shot Network, the control room scenes we shot in Toronto, and the people behind the console were real technicians, Canadian technicians, and we would talk afterwards. They were amazed at how Sydney controlled the material in the console, what you saw on the screens, because that was live. All of that was live.
Right.
And so Sydney felt he loved cameramen, he loved writers, he loved pretty much everybody, except he did not really have a good feeling for the editing process. Sydney was very fast, very fast. He made what, 60, 70 movies, 70 movies probably. I don't think anybody will ever come close to that. It's just not economically feasible anymore. But Sydney made a bunch of movies. And I asked Sydney one day when we were doing Network, I said, how do you pick your movies? And since I had done The Seagull, which I think was a better film than the critics did, because God, that was a shock to me. But that's another story. But I said, how do you pick your movies, your projects? And he said, look, he held up his hand. He said, you do 5 movies, and one is going to be very good, and one is going to be terrible, and the others are going to be okay or average. And the important thing is to keep working. And I took that to heart. But after the first 2 movies I did with Sydney, the first one, Seagull, he stood over me and he told me exactly where to make cuts. And the only time, well, yeah, he would sometimes put his hand on the brake of the moviola. These were all on film, not electronically done.
Right.
And he put his hand on the brake, which was kind of my job. But okay, that's what he wants to do. And we cut the film, and I was learning an enormous amount. I only drew the line when he actually tried to put his foot on my foot pedal. And I stepped on his foot kind of hard one day, and he never did. It's kind of sneaky of me, but that's what I did. I was a younger man then. Anyway, I did that, and then I quickly did Last of the Mobile Hotshots, which was a misbegotten movie from the beginning. And I had to leave it because I was going to go do The 12 Chairs for Mel Brooks in Yugoslavia. And Hotshots was running a little bit over. And Sydney really, he asked me to do another movie. I was not available. And then Network turned up years later. And I just, you read the script of Network and this is a marvelous movie. But I did vow to myself, if Sydney put his hand on my handbrake, I would walk out of the room. I mean, I was not good. By this point, I was perfectly ready to cut my own movies.
Right. And did he let you do what he wanted what you wanted? Like, he left you alone largely. Is that because of his relationship with Dee Dee Allen, what he had learned from her?
So. Yeah, I believe that Dee Dee did Pornberg, not Dee Dee did Dog Day
yeah.
and Serpico.
Right.
I don't remember the order, but the
Serpico
deal
was first. Yeah. Serpico, then Dog Day. Yeah.
And when Sydney and Dee Dee were announced as a pair, all of us in New York were saying, oh, this should be very interesting because it's an immovable object and it was tough. we thought. But because of the schedule, Sidney let her cut the movie. Uh,
Oh,
and he realized that there were things in the material that he probably hadn't thought of in advance. And the film was certainly terrific
oh
and
yeah.
exciting and moved. And I always felt Sidney had tended to be a little wooden in his rhythms in the cutting room. And so when Network came up, I mean, he had already done Serpico. Didi was not available to do Network, I think, is part of it. And also, Fosse had probably recommended me to Paddy Chayefsky, who was one of the producers and, of course, the writer. So when I started the film again, it was butter. It was just wonderful. Uh,
You mentioned it was quite easy.
the
You felt it
cut,
was easy to put together.
it was incredibly easy. Sidney does not shoot a lot of takes for the most
Right.
part. Um, I was shocked that I got an Academy Award nomination for it. Um, but when I looked at it again, or as I was doing it, I knew I was working with great performances. I did very little. I really it came out of the camera, and I started putting it together. Yeah, there was some problem sequences. An actor would go up on a line, and there was the scene with Faye Dunaway in the kitchen when they confront each other, and Bill Holden gives that incredible speech about an aging writer, and you know, he went up at one point. These were long takes, but
Yeah.
I felt there were places I wanted to see. I wanted the audience to see, and I wanted to see because I regard myself as the audience, which might be a little egotistical on my part, but I think that's my function to make it interesting and to keep people watching and listening. So, um, there were places where I wanted to see Faye's face, but otherwise I would have stayed on Bill Holden pretty much the whole time. But he went up at one point,
Hmm.
went to her a second time. But otherwise, the stuff was easy to cut. Sidney wanted to cut two scenes, the ending. He wanted to be with me on that, and also the Mad as Hell scene. So he came into the cutting room. We did the Mad as Hell scene very quickly. That's with the audience, with the people all around New York City screaming out the windows.
Yeah. Right.
Um, I would have liked to have taken another shot at it, but I thought it was pretty damn good the way it was. And then the ending, Sidney came across the street, and this is how Sidney was. He was shooting right across the street from where I was editing in a disused recording studio. And he came over at lunchtime and he said, "This is what I like to see." Boom, 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 boom. And he laid out 10 cuts. And in my head, I knew this was not going to work. And I did exactly what he asked. He looked at it and he said, "Do it your way." And he went back to the shooting on the set. And I did it my way, which is what's in the movie now. But that was when I could not understand his concept, even when I saw the dailies. We didn't really talk it over much. I knew where it had to go, and he just had a. I don't remember his version.
You told this story about how you had suggested to Sydney to reshoot it because Holden was out of focus. Uh
That was a slightly different scene. See,
oh,
that's
okay, it's not the same scene. I thought okay.
no, no, no. It's not the same scene.
Okay.
I believe that's the scene where he comes home and he's at the bottom of the staircase. It was in her duplex, and he's looking up the staircase. And when I saw the dailies, the railing behind him, the stair rail
Yeah,
was sharp, and he was a little out of focus. And I
right.
called Sidney when I saw it because they were still on the same set. And I called Sidney, and at dailies that day, he looked at it and he said, "No, it's okay. Nobody will notice. It's going to be on for a short time." And he was right. I mean, when I look at it, yeah, he's a little soft, but so what?
Yeah, because I have it here. I watched it again the other
Oh,
night and I was looking out for it. I was like, I couldn't see it. I couldn't
oh,
quite spot it.
it's after the scene. It's after the kitchen scene. It's when he
Okay.
comes home,
Okay.
and I think he goes upstairs and starts. Well, she has already started packing his stuff, I believe, It's just before that scene, I think.
Okay,
It's been
okay.
years. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, if I couldn't spot it, it must have been quite minor. But I take it. Is it accurate to say that Lumet was more about the performances? If something went out of
Oh,
focus a little bit, he was just like
yeah.
he didn't
Oh,
want to do it again.
yeah. And I never actually. Well, Sidney said, and he's right. You know, you're not going to get an actor to the same place.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Sometimes you have to do it if it's really terrible. To go back to Sidney, I learned a very valuable lesson from him the very first film I did on The Seagull, because he wanted, Sidney was very protective of writers' words. And in this case, it was Chekhov. And the script had been written. Oh, yeah, no, the script was not important so much. It was an adaptation written by a Russian woman of that period, the Baroness Budberg, I believe. But Sidney wanted to take out about 3.5, 4 minutes of a scene with Kathleen Widows. And he said, try this. And so I took out, well, before doing it, I said, Sidney, her head is going to spin around like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. It doesn't make any sense. And he said, try it. So I did it, and her head spun around. And Sidney said, that's okay. I said, Sidney, it's terrible. You can't do that. And he said, don't worry, it's projectionist error. And I said, Sidney, what is projectionist error? And he said, most people go to the movies once. This was in a different time, remember?
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Most people go to the movies once, and they figure if they see something this bad, it's got to be that the projectionist ripped the film and made a bad cut, a bad splice.
Right.
It was very valuable to me over my career. I mean, I didn't focus on matching action or things like that. I mean, I did when I could and when it felt right, but I just tried to keep the story moving.
I know you told this story that I really find interesting is when you transpose the cuts from the scene where William Holden and Faye Dunaway are having sex and all she's doing is talking about work, and which is
Right.
a very funny scene, and then it immediately cuts to Holden leaving his wife, and you don't even you just know based on her reaction. I love it starts on her face and she's crying, and you know right away, oh God, he's
Yeah.
breaking the news. That you don't see that kind of editing very much. I like that nowadays, like they just kind of like often I in films, not that there's anything wrong with it, but a scene will end on a close-up or a dissolve or a music, or someone will walk out of the room to give the audience a sense that, okay, this scene is ending. But I love that, just that abrupt cut, which you saw, of course, in Lenny and all that jazz a lot. So I was curious, how did you come up with that?
Well, I didn't come up with it, for God's sake. I mean, uh, I've always wanted to just keep it moving, and
Right.
that was maybe one of my weaknesses. Sometimes I should have lingered a little bit, but I always like to get out and move to the next scene,
Yeah. Yeah.
because somebody might find out that you're faking. Uh, what um, what happened with that one? Now let me think.
Because he
Yeah,
wanted to cut that scene,
no,
right,
no.
Lumet?
Well, the scene, Lumet, Chayefsky, and the producer, uh, the co-producer, who was Paddy's partner, uh, they said to me one day, let's take out the scene with Beatrice Straight, that she played the wife,
Yeah,
Holden's. And I said, no, 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 no. It's a great scene.
it really
I
is.
felt it was one of the best scenes of middle-aged love, as it were,
Yeah, yeah,
married love, and the destruction, or maybe not the destruction of a marriage. We don't know how that ended. Actually, it
yeah.
ends on a note of hope by the end of the movie.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah, but they felt that the Beatrice Straight scene, which was 2.5 minutes long, was hurting the movie. It was just we were looking to get a little time out, about 3 minutes of the movie, and we eventually found it elsewhere. But in that case, I didn't want to take that scene out. I just felt it was too good. And I said, why don't we just transpose that scene? Uh, Now I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah. Well, the lovemaking scene
Yeah.
came after that scene.
Right.
And
Right.
I said, we have to have the lovemaking scene to show how shallow she is as far as the emotional relationship. And then we go to this really emotionally hot relationship in a way. It's a married relationship. It's a serious relationship.
Right.
And and not that his affair with her wasn't. She nailed it. I mean, the wife, Beatrice Straight, nailed it in her performance.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I didn't take it out. And then a couple of days later, somebody said, why don't you take out that scene? And again, we're cutting on film. So it's not, if you're doing it on an electronic thing, it takes a second to remove a scene. It takes, 30
Yeah.
seconds to transpose things.
Right.
But I kept saying, let me move this scene. And they said, no, 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 just take it out. No, let's leave it. And I don't know exactly what I was hoping for, except that I knew that Dan Melnick, who was not, he was the actual executive producer of the film. And Dan and I knew each other from television. Uh, and I knew that when he saw this scene, that he would feel differently about it. So he came in on a Friday and we ran the movie for him, the whole movie. And then there was a discussion afterwards, and I went home eventually. And Monday morning, I got a call from Howard Gottfried, who was Paddy's partner. And Howard said, Alan, and he sort of sang my name. Um, Dan Melnick came up with this great idea. How about transposing those two scenes? And I did something I never did. I mean, I said, Howard, I've been after you guys for 2 weeks to do that. And you said, no, just get rid of it. And he said, does it matter where a good idea comes from? And he's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, it doesn't.
I stayed in the movie, and she, for her 2.5 minute scene, won an Academy Award, which was
Yeah.
amazing.
It
Uh,
it also gave Holden's character it just showed him as a more flawed person. The fact that he's having this affair and then with this shallow woman and then leaving this very strong woman who he's been, because his part is I think if he wasn't flawed, he would just be the good guy trying to help Peter Finch.
yeah,
But that gave him more, it made it less one dimensional. It gave
it
him
made it
more. Yeah,
less of a buddy movie
exactly.
in a
Yeah.
way. It brought in a character. It was a 3 character movie, really. There are
That's
some
true.
lovely, wonderful characters with great performances, but it was their story, the three of them, and to have this, and his wife in that speech talks about affairs with your secretaries on trips and things, and she could deal with that. It was a
Yeah.
marriage. But here, this was serious. He was
Yeah.
breaking up
Oh yeah.
a life,
Yeah.
more than one life, because he had a kid. And the whole thing was uh,
Yeah.
very serious stuff. And that's one of the few battles I win. You win or you lose. Whenever I want to make a change of that kind of magnitude, I try and show it to the producer if they don't like it, or the director. And if they don't like it, I'll put it aside at some point, and at some point I'll bring it back. I'll just hold on to it, but I'm not going to have a knockdown fight over these things.
Right. Of course. Was that last, I love the last scene where you see Peter Finch killed and then it goes to, they're showing it on television with all these screens and then the other screens are like little commercials of children.
Right.
It was funny, how all that was together to make it look like, oh, it's just
Yeah.
something else on TV. Was that in the script or
Yes.
was that okay? It was. I was
That was
wondering
in the script, but
if
we
that
picked,
was
we
okay.
picked the commercials for various reasons.
Yeah.
We picked the commercials for budgetary reasons because we could get them.
Right.
A lot of stuff you did with Sydney was for budgetary reasons.
Right. Right. Well, he was always under budget, right? He was always on
Always,
time, under
always.
budget.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
incredible.
that's why he had this great career.
There's another really interesting story you told, which I didn't know, was that Chayefsky wanted to fire Faye Dunaway. Was it mainly because she just was fumbling over the lines? Was that the main reason?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe because she's so good in it. I mean, the energy is fantastic.
But if you watch the movie, and you obviously did, you watch the movie. She stumbles a few times in her big speeches. In the big speech, when she's wearing the white gown and she's speaking to all of
Oh, in the that big hall,
the big hall, yeah,
banquet hall, yeah,
she fumbles there a couple of
right.
times. But I fought very hard. Sidney came to my cutting room one morning. He would come, and I don't remember why, but we went over from my place to watch dailies with everybody else around lunchtime. And Sidney came over, and he told me Paddy wanted to to replace her. And I just fought like crazy. And I pointed out to Sidney that the energy she was bringing was invaluable. And I think he knew it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think my help, I might have helped in the final argument. I don't know. But she brought so much energy to that role.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. She was really, really good. Just after watching it again, I mean, everybody is fantastic. I mean, one of the ones that stood out to me even more, I've always loved Duvall, but he's such a monster in this. I mean, he's such a cold, calculating person. And, for years, people would say that, oh, this film predicted the future. And that's always been true. But I think it's been well over 10 years since I've seen it, before the Trump era. And now I'm like, oh, my God, this is like a documentary, in the last 7 years. I mean, it seems to get more and more relevant. It's scary.
Yeah,
it's worse than this is.
Paddy was prescient.
Yeah.
I mean, he saw what was going to happen with Fox News, with television news. It's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
News became a rating source as opposed to just cool Walter Cronkite news. And, we're still with the oil crisis. We use quite a bit of documentary footage, newsreel footage in the movie. And that stuff is still timely.
Oh, God, yeah.
I wish he was still alive, though he would be in his 90s now, I guess.
Yes. Did you meet him much?
Oh, Paddy, yeah, we spent a lot of time in the cutting room. But I had met Paddy before. I met him at a party at Bob Fosse's house where I discovered he cheated at croquet. But you wouldn't hold it against him. A terrific, terrific human being. Just
such a great writer. Marty and all the live television.
And Hospital. Don't forget
Hospital. Yeah, George C. Scott.
Great
That's
movie.
absolutely fantastic. I want to thank Alan again for taking the time to talk to me about his life and career and talking about this masterpiece Network, because it really is a masterpiece. It's so powerful. It's got incredible performances. It's a brilliant script. It's unforgettable. It is so strong, and it's very actor driven. The performances really drive the piece. It really relies on incredibly committed and rich full acting. And before I get into more specifics on the performances, for those of you who have not seen the film, the plot, according to IMDb, is a television network cynically exploits a deranged former anchor's ravings and revelations about the news media for its own profit, but finds that his message may be difficult to control. What I like right off the top is that we see Peter Finch's character and William Holden's character, who have been at this news organization for years, and a big part of this film is this generational gap between the older generation going out and retiring, and now the younger crowd coming in, and how they look at life and and everything in a very different light. And so, because the ratings are so low, they took Howard Beale, who Peter Finch plays, off the air. They fired him, and so they go out drinking, him and Max, played by William Holden, and it just sort of immediately tells the audience that these two people were close friends, and there's something really sad about it as they get drunk at this bar. First they're laughing, and then before you know it, Peter Finch is down and out at the bar after swinging too many drinks back. And then the immediately after this is when Howard Beale says right on the air that he was going to kill himself live on television. And this is where Faye Dunaway comes in as Diana Christensen, who is this opportunist, this woman who has no morals, is all about money and success at all costs. And one thing I noticed on my recent viewing is how often she describes life events in terms of fiction. Like she'll say, well, this isn't a good script, or this is a poor ending, or whatever. She'll describe everything as if it's a show or a sitcom. She's just so disconnected to reality, and she's looking at everything that she sees on television, even if it's real, as an opportunity, because we see her early on watching this footage of this robbery being taken place. And I mean, Faye Dunaway's so good in this, just the way she said, this is terrific stuff, or this is great stuff. I'm not saying I'm not sure if that's the exact line, but she just is so enthusiastic about finding a way to begin to put this on television. And now with iPhones and people and TikTok and Instagram, we see Facebook, we see all these real life horrors play out all the time. Because people just can take out their phones, film it, and put it on the internet. So, as I said to Alan, for years people said this film predicted the future. We went from objective news to subjective news with, this is well before Fox News and different cable networks, and that became like entertainment shows, even though that's just, these are the facts. This is what's going on, which is what the news always was until it turned into entertainment. And isn't that now? That is so the world we live in. Everything is reality TV. Everything is entertainment, particularly once Trump took office, who was a showman, who was from reality television and knew the television medium very well, and was able to use that to his advantage. And so it's just when I watch it now, even though I've seen it so many times, I'm like, oh my God, this film is more relevant now than ever. It's really quite astonishing. But what's interesting is that it's actually a very simple story. And the characters are not necessarily portrayed in any kind of complex manner, because it doesn't call for it. It's not a character study. It is not psychologically complex. It's really about this, what's happening within society, in terms of how the dangers of news now becoming a part of entertainment, and the generational gaps between the new people coming in. We're very much Faye Dunaway and Robert Duvall as Frank Hackett, who are all about profits, and William Holden and Peter Finch, who are not that type, who are from the old school and had morals and just were very proud of the work they did and were honest, but they have their share of flaws. We don't really know so much about Howard Beale because he's quickly, obviously, losing his mind and is unwell and needs help. But William Holden is someone who cheats on his wife and continues to cheat on his wife by having this affair with Diana Christensen, played by Faye Dunaway. And like I said to Alan, I think that was a good idea, because otherwise he would have been just a supportive friend. So it made him less one-dimensional, and he just couldn't help but love this woman. First of all, it's Faye Dunaway, which you can understand why he fell for her. And even though he knows that she's, as he describes her, she's from the Bugs Bunny generation or Looney Tune generation, as he puts it, something along those lines, he knows that he cannot connect with her, that he cannot relate to her, that she is just not connected to reality, but he cannot help but fall crazy madly in love with her, and can we ever, right? And so it works comically, of course, with that love scene that I talked about with Alan Heim, when she's talking about nothing, she's only talking about work during sex. It's almost as if she gets off on it because she has an orgasm within seconds, which is very, very funny. Probably the funniest comedic scene I've ever seen. And then boom, as I said to Alan, it cuts immediately to that great scene where he's leaving his wife, which is such a phenomenal scene. Duvall is really good in this, as I said to Alan Heim. What a performance! I mean, he's always impeccable. But when I think of Duvall, I think of, like, The Godfather or The Apostle, Apocalypse Now. I don't think of him as much in this, but I think perhaps because it's such an ensemble piece that everybody really stands out. Everyone's so incredible, but he's so good in this. I mean, particularly the scenes he has with William Holden when he fires him. It's almost like he wants to hurt him, and he tells him something along the lines of "pack your bags and get out, and if you don't, I'll have the security drag you out." I mean, he is just looking to throw this guy out and take over as soon as he can. And, at first, Frank Hackett is hesitant. I mean, this really is Diana Christensen's idea to push this. She's like the person saying, put Howard Beale on, what he's saying is fantastic. The ratings went sky high. We can use this and we can exploit this. The ratings were so low that this will save the network. And Duvall, as Hackett, is hesitant at first. He says, we can't put a guy who mentally needs help, mentally disturbed, as he says, something along those lines, on the air. And very quickly she talks him into it, and you see that there is a side of him that is amused by it. Once he starts to see the dollar signs, there's just a moment he has where he looks at her and he grins a little bit, and then he's like, all right, I'll think about it, and very quickly he puts this into motion. But he's a bully. I mean, he pushes everybody around, even Wesley Addy as Nelson Cheney. They're having a meeting, and at first I think he's the president. He's got a higher position in the network, and he says, well, I'm not going to do this. And very quickly Frank says, sit down. It's just like very much like, I'm in charge. And everyone he basically squeezes everybody and bends everybody to his will, because it's like, hey, do you want a job? Not that he says this, but that's what it comes down to. If you don't like it, get out. And I think a lot of these people who like Nelson Cheney, who sticks around, this is their options. You either get out or you go for the ride. And so they have a choice here. And they choose which they choose to stick it out and keep their jobs. So, of course, as the film progresses, there's the classic speeches. I want you to get out of your window and go and scream out your window. I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And so everything's going so well. The ratings are sky high. This is a big hit, until, of course, he starts to talk about Saudi Arabia basically buying this parent company of this network, and so he's basically saying how money from Saudi Arabia is now coming into the country and into the company. And of course, this is where it's like, oh, we can't let this guy say whatever he wants. And going back to Frank Hackett, I mean, the way he responds when he realizes that he's ruined, where that his boss, played by Ned Beatty, Arthur Jensen's going to fire him. He's telling too much truths now. Truths are going to hurt them. He tells everyone to write the White House, and just the way that Duvall cracks, and he starts to say he's going to kill him. I mean, he's like a gangster in that scene. I mean, he's really, really scary. And then the following scene, of course, I mean, I love Ned Beatty. He's such a fantastic, underrated actor in that great scene where he basically tells Howard Beale to watch his mouth, but he does it in this, this way which is so grand, and like it's almost like he's this Satan himself, as he tells him to atone and back down in that long table, which separates them with all those lamps. I mean, it's such a great shot because it makes him look like he's not even human. I mean, it just makes him look like he is has so much power and he's on top of the world, and you better bend to his will. And but what's interesting is that the ratings begin to go down. This starts to not work anymore. But Jensen, for reasons which are not really explained, he wants to keep him on the air. All you find out is that Frank Hackett says, "Well, Jensen likes what he's saying outside of what he was saying about Saudi Arabia, I imagine," and so they want to keep him on. He wants to keep him on the air at all costs. And so this is, again, these are people about money, and Diana Christensen and Frank Hackett, they think we're gonna have to kill this guy. And so they kill him, right on television. And as I said to Alan Heim, it's such a fantastic ending with the various screens of kids commercials with children, and then this guy shot right, the little video frame below it where this guy's shot, and people with guns, and it trivializes everything. It makes everything look like it's fiction by having it next to a commercial or another news segment. I thought that was quite clever and funny. And maybe it was funny then. I don't know how funny it is now, because like I said, this is the world, unfortunately, we live in. Just touching back on this relationship with Diana, played by Faye Dunaway, and Max. They have some fantastic scenes together. Just, at first this affair begins, and then once Max stands up to Frank Hackett, and they throw him out, Diana just says, "Well, I guess that's it between us, because he's not going to want to be with me now." And then later on, I mean, that's the thing, was that she just had he just found her irresistible, and he tracks her down, and they keep this relationship going. And now he left his wife, which he hadn't done before. And it's really quite something to think that he fell so deeply in love with her. But it's very believable, because sometimes you just fall for someone who may be totally wrong for you, and it may be just because she's very, very beautiful that he just couldn't help himself. But this is the first time he leaves his wife and everything to be with this woman, until finally at the end he's like, I can't be with you. This is, you're just detached from reality. So they have some fantastic scenes, and you begin to see more of a little bit more of her vulnerability when she tries to talk him out of it. But as she says, she's all about career, and that's it. I mean, she is not good outside of her job. She is not emotionally equipped to be in a relationship and to give a guy like Max what he needs. So it's quite something. And as Alan said, it is optimistic at the end, because is he going to go back with his wife? Is he going to beg her forgiveness? We don't know, but I think we at least know that even though he knows what he's doing the whole time is wrong and he just cannot help it, I think he finally knows that there is no chance that he can be with this woman Diana, because she just doesn't have any morals. I also really like the subplot, because Diana starts to think of other things that she can put on. So she puts these terrorists on gives them a television show, and they're like a communist organization, like a very far left organization. And Marlene Warfield, who plays the leader of this terrorist group, she's fantastic. And it's funny because she's a communist, but then later on she starts to get mad because she felt that she should get more money out of all these deals and more power. And it's like, well, hang on a second, this is going against your this is going against your political views. But it just shows that I think ultimately what the film was saying is that money just corrupts people. Often, I'm not saying always, but it often corrupts people, no matter what you say or what you believe or what you're part of. Sometimes when it comes down to what you can get from something, people will go there. And again, he's doing it in a way which is very satirical and truthful, and something ugly about that, something that that doesn't sit right on a moral level, but is it plays very in a very comical, truthful way, and she's fantastic. Marlene Warfield. I'm not too familiar with her, but I really loved her in this. Everyone's fantastic. Faye Dunaway won an Academy Award for this, and so did Beatrice Straight for Louise Schumacher, who was William Holden's wife. It's phenomenal, and I think it will always hold up, and it's very powerful, and I've always loved it. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.